The story continues with the crowd roaring in approval for the man now known as the Old Man among the public. Meanwhile, Angelica makes sure to thank the sensei for giving her a taste of sweet revenge, though not too sweet. The host then calls for applause for the winner, who eagerly soaks up the love from the audience. As for Snape, Reinette observes that he seems unusually calm, and the businessman admits that the blow wasn't as painful as he had expected. In fact, he believes it was beneficial for his brother to learn a valuable lesson from the defeat, especially since the boxer had ended his career by believing he was unbeatable due to his monstrous strength. Alice, however, comments that Snape always speaks in complicated terms, and Mizip jumps in, saying these are the kinds of things adults must deal with constantly. Though Snape is handling the loss better than expected, he admits it's unfortunate that he won't have Angelica Diarmuid as his wife. On the other hand, Angelica couldn't be more thrilled by the Dragonkin's downfall and takes the opportunity to rub it in Snape's face, mocking his crushed dream of joining the nobility through marriage. In his usual refined manner, Snape laments that having a lovely maiden like Diarmuid was something he had longed for, though it is now out of reach. These words trigger an odd reaction from Lampy Joe. Meanwhile, Kerwin Orwolf, preparing to enter the ring, is feeling on top of the world. His boss praises him as an exceptional boxer, and Kerwin jokes that the old man must have eaten something bad to be so sentimental. However, that's not the case. The human simply wants his protege to give his best effort, which Kerwin fully intends to do. With that, the second match of the semifinals is announced. Brufston Ashork, an orc who knocked out all his previous opponents with a single punch, will face three-time champion and fan favorite, Kerwin Orwolf. Angelica is surprised by the thunderous applause the Beastman receives, but Rick expected nothing less from the greatest champion. Confident but cautious, Orwolf knows he's up against a truly unique opponent. As he studies the massive orc, the ravenous wolf doesn't see a humanoid figure, but rather an impenetrable wall standing before him. Kerwin, using his incredible speed, advances and tests the orc's defense with a flurry of punches, but they don't even faze Brufston. Kerwin knows that if he had been struck by a punch from Brufston, he'd likely be dead. Then, the unexpected happens. Jeeth, as his name suggests, rises from the ashes, his eyes glowing an intense red, and his body more imposing than ever. Consumed by madness, the Dragonkin leaps into the crowd, stirring chaos with a series of wild strikes. Snape recognizes the devastating effects of Dragon Rekorgan coursing through his brother's veins and braces for the worst. Determined to continue the fight, Kerwin calls out Jeeth for disrupting the match. Without hesitation, Jeeth charges at him, but Kerwin swiftly counters with a punch to the stomach that leaves the Dragonkin reeling. Orwolf shuts him down with just one hit, shocking Rick, Angelica, and Reinette, who now realize the Beastman must be an S-rank fighter. Due to the chaos caused by Jeeth's outburst, the event host announces that the semifinals will be postponed until tomorrow, as the injured spectators need immediate attention. Kerwin, although in peak form, accepts the decision gracefully. Brufston, however, notices a hint of uncertainty in Kerwin's stance, and his words strike the reigning champion deeply. Later, the Orochalcum Fist team reconvenes at their usual spot, the Militia Tavern, except for Rick, who went for a casual jog all the way to Clarishja territory, a modest 700-mile round trip. Speaking of which, Rick has just arrived at the kingdom's borders, where a mountain reminds him of Reinette's curves. There, he finds Kerwin Orwolf, peacefully training until Rick approaches him. Rick asks if Kerwin isn't worried about overexerting himself before tomorrow's match, but it seems the Beastman is more interested in using Rick as a sparring partner. Without wasting time, Kerwin calls for a fight, and Rick responds with a lightning-fast punch, which Kerwin manages to block. Impressed by the block, Rick wonders why Kerwin took a hit during the tournament. He jokes that Kerwin must have had a blocked nose and couldn't sense his opponent's movements, but Kerwin explains the real reason. He shares that he grew up in the slums, where fighting was his favorite pastime. However, there came a point when he mercilessly beat everyone, and the thrill of fighting faded. When he arrived in Heractopia, things were exciting at first, but after becoming an undefeated champion for the second time, knocking out opponents with a single punch in under a minute, he realized that even official tournaments offered no real challenge. The only thing that kept him going was seeing the satisfaction on his boss's face after each victory. One day, Kerwin overheard his boss telling a gym employee that the ease with which the fights ended was hurting their business, as no one wanted to pay for a predictable outcome. On the eve of the third tournament's final, Kerwin reflected on how he could help his boss without driving him into bankruptcy. During the fight, the first punch thrown at him seemed incredibly slow, but Kerwin decided to take the hit and pretend to be defeated for the audience's sake. In the tournaments that followed, he continued adjusting his strength to entertain the crowd, but the truth was, he no longer felt any passion for fighting. After hearing the entire story, Rick could somewhat understand Kerwin's perspective but warned him that things would be different tomorrow. Orwolf wasn't convinced, and Gladiator didn't try to persuade him further, leaving with little more to say. The next day, a defensive spell was cast to protect the audience, ensuring everyone's safety. As the fight began, Kerwin charged at Brufston, spinning his arm at high speed with the rolling fang to amplify the power of his strike. Brufston blocked it effortlessly, though with slightly less ease than before. Now, the orc began dodging punches rather than risking his guard, counterattacking with his fists and forcing Kerwin to stay sharp to avoid being flattened. After a brief pause in the action, Brufston had already analyzed Kerwin's fighting style and deduced that he was holding something back. Kerwin admitted as much but realized he might have to drop that approach against the orc. He acknowledged it was shameful for a champion to deceive the audience, but Brufston saw it differently. To him, prioritizing the spectators was what a true professional should do, even if it meant the orc couldn't fight at full strength. To even the odds, Brufston decided to fight using only 2 fingers without moving a step. With that settled, Kerwin charged again with the rolling fang, but this time, Brufston blocked it with just his index and middle fingers before landing a powerful blow. Kerwin managed to dodge the second strike, which would have been far more devastating as the crowd chanted his name. Feeling excitement surge through him once again, Kerwin realized this wasn't just any rival, it was his chance to unleash everything he'd been holding back. Suddenly, his boss yelled out Orwolf's name, accusing him of faking the fight. The businessman, whose dream was to train the strongest boxer in history, demanded that Orwolf stop holding back. These words gave Kerwin the push he needed to stop holding back. Now, with his boss's approval, the goal was to show his full potential. Kerwin unleashed a devastating punch, forcing Brufston to block with his whole hand. The orc claimed he was simply adjusting his strength. From there, Kerwin went all out, but soon found himself cornered and forced to retreat, using his iron body technique to avoid being crushed against the wall. The crowd had mixed feelings while the fight was thrilling. Kerwin's past deception left some feeling betrayed. By this point, Kerwin no longer cared about what the audience thought. He unleashed the Flame Wave, a 5th nature composite spell. Though dogfolk aren't known for magic, Kerwin had developed his skills to an unprecedented level, rivaling Rick Gladiator's mentors, according to Gladiator himself. After seeing Brufston defend against the flames with a rock, Kerwin attacked with instant step and strong fist, then summoned the 7th nature composite spell. Forced rope, but he didn't stop there. In an attempt to subdue Brufston, he began preparing an 8th nature spell, leaving the audience in awe as the arena trembled. Kerwin finally cast Angel's Tear in the sky, causing Rick to fear for everyone's safety. The spell forced Brufston to respond seriously. The orc threw a punch at the energy mass in the ozone layer, reducing the Angel's Tear to dust. With that, Brufston gave the orc's quarter approval gesture, signaling that the fight was about to get deadly serious. For the first time, Kerwin felt real terror. After dodging a punch, the wind from Brufston's swing nearly knocked him over. Out of breath and with nothing left, Kerwin fell back, firing off a series of spells that didn't even make Brufston flinch. Kerwin was utterly exhausted, and a punch to his gut made his internal organs feel like they were being cooked. It would have been easier to give up, but Kerwin had waited so long for a worthy rival that he forced himself to stand once more. With the last of his energy, he went for an all-out brawl, but his stamina quickly gave out. The voracious wolf from the slums was left drained before the wise beast. Even so, the crowd urged Kerwin to keep fighting, cheering him on despite realizing they'd been deceived. This support gave him a second wind. With no magic or strength left, Kerwin dug deep into his spirit for one final punch, merging strong fist, rolling fang and flame sword. Brufston silently applauded Kerwin's effort in his mind, too lazy to clap. Seeing his strongest punch absorbed so effortlessly, Kerwin smiled and admitted this was the most fun he'd ever had. In honor of such a fight, Brufston gave Kerwin the respect he deserved by landing a punch that knocked the beastman out cold. Despite the defeat, Kerwin's master still considered him the greatest boxer in history. Thanks for watching my recaps.